Meet Max. Hours spent gaming, endless TikTok scrolling, and YouTube rabbit holes that never end. Max's life is stuck. But what if all that wasted time could actually be the key to something powerful? What if Max could use his dark side to turn things around? Using insights from Carl Jung, we're diving into how embracing your hidden potential, even the dark, wasted parts, can actually transform your life. Today, we'll show you the steps to break free from distraction and use that energy to rebuild from the inside out. Part 1. The Endless Distractions. In his search for answers, Max comes across Carl Jung's idea of the shadow self. Jung describes the shadow as the hidden part of ourselves that holds our unacknowledged desires, insecurities, and frustrations, the thoughts we push away. Ignoring this side of ourselves, Jung warns, only gives it more control, often trapping us in unhealthy habits or cycles. Suddenly, Max realizes his distractions aren't just random. They're ways of avoiding deeper, uncomfortable truths within himself. The gaming, the endless scrolling, and the YouTube rabbit holes, these distractions are more than just habits. They're forms of escape, shields that protect him from confronting his own feelings of inadequacy and the fear of taking real action. By filling every quiet moment with noise, he's hiding from his own inner doubts and frustrations. Rather than face these challenging emotions, he's found comfort in shallow distractions. But each distraction only feeds the loop, pushing his real goals further away and leaving him feeling more stuck than ever. The first breakthrough comes when he begins to see his distractions not as enemies, but as messages. They're signals, calling him to confront the parts of himself he's been avoiding. Each time he feels the pull to escape, he starts to ask himself, what am I really avoiding right now? In doing so, he shifts from mindless habits to intentional self-awareness. For anyone feeling similarly trapped, the lesson here is clear. When you notice yourself reaching for a distraction, pause. Reflect on what you might be running from. Seeing distractions as signals can turn them into opportunities for growth rather than sources of guilt. With this newfound awareness, Max knows that recognizing the shadow is just the beginning. To truly break free from this cycle, he needs to confront what's at the root of these distractions and understand the desires he's been too afraid to face. Part 2. Confronting Hidden Desires. Starting to explore beneath the surface, Max notices a pattern. Whenever he thinks about big goals or dreams, there's an urge to turn away, to find something easier to focus on. Games and videos give him an escape, a place where he doesn't have to confront the uncomfortable possibility of failure or the anxiety of starting something new. There's comfort in these distractions, a familiarity that keeps him from looking too closely at his ambitions and the fears tied to them. Over time, he sees how avoiding these deeper desires has left him trapped in a loop, constantly pushing his dreams further out of reach. Carl Jung believed that when desires are pushed into the unconscious, they don't simply vanish. Instead, they become shadows, influencing actions without us realizing it. These shadow aspects of ourselves, including unfulfilled ambitions and hidden insecurities, affect choices and behavior indirectly. For Max, the habit of escapism isn't random. It's his shadow steering him away from facing those vulnerable parts of himself. Confronting these hidden desires gives him a choice, to either let them drive him unconsciously or use them as fuel for change. Max begins a daily practice of self-reflection. Each evening, he takes a few moments to sit with his thoughts, noticing the emotions that arise without judgment. When he feels the familiar pull toward distraction, he asks himself, what am I avoiding? What part of my potential am I afraid to confront? By facing these fears directly, he stops hiding from his ambitions and starts viewing them as challenges to rise to rather than threats to escape from. For anyone struggling with a similar cycle, this practice of reflection becomes an essential step in turning hidden fears into conscious motivations. Understanding his deeper motivations brings Max a sense of clarity, but he knows that awareness alone isn't enough. Part 3. Setting boundaries with distractions. Realizing that simply understanding his shadow isn't enough, Max knows he needs to take practical steps to prevent it from dominating his time. Each evening, after hours lost in gaming or scrolling, he's left with a gnawing sense of emptiness, a reminder of how far these distractions pull him from his goals. He recalls Jung's belief that embracing one's dark side is essential, but it must be paired with discipline to prevent it from consuming everything. Max understands that to use his shadow constructively, he'll need to establish boundaries around the very habits that have kept him stuck. Jung's concept of integration isn't about suppressing the shadow, but about giving it a defined space, a boundary within which it can exist without derailing personal growth. Max sees that he can't eliminate his dark side, nor should he try. Instead, he can direct it, choosing to engage in activities like gaming or scrolling with intention rather than compulsion. With structure, he can enjoy these interests without letting them take control. Integration, then, is about using both light and dark aspects of himself in a balanced way, channeling his interests so they work in harmony with his higher goals. To start this shift, Max decides to establish specific time blocks for distractions. Gaming and watching videos now happen only after he's achieved a set list of meaningful tasks, turning these activities into rewards rather than mindless habits. By assigning them a clear boundary, he transforms his relationship with his dark side, reclaiming his time and attention. This practice teaches him that discipline isn't about restricting his interests. It's about using self-control to create a space where his dark side can coexist with his ambitions. Boundaries become a tool to transform potentially limiting habits into assets, allowing his dark side to provide motivation and enjoyment without becoming a barrier to success. Now that he's established structure and control, Max feels a shift in his outlook. But as he begins to reflect on past choices, he realizes there's a need to look at his old habits as lessons, steps that, if reframed, could serve his future growth rather than hold him back. Part 4. Reframing Past Mistakes. As Max creates boundaries and focuses on intentional actions, he begins to look back on the time he once spent on distractions, feeling the weight of regret creeping in. Every night lost to endless scrolling or gaming now feels like a missed opportunity, a gap in his path to growth. He can't help but wonder where he'd be if he had spent that time differently. But instead of wallowing, Max recalls Jung's ideas about personal growth and transformation through self-acceptance and learning from past actions. Carl Jung described life as a hero's journey, filled with trials and setbacks essential for personal development. According to Jung, past mistakes are the lessons that allow us to evolve, not signs of inadequacy or reasons for self-judgment. True growth arises from reframing our past not as a series of wrongs, but as a sequence of learning experiences, each one leading us closer to self-discovery and resilience. Through this lens, mistakes become necessary stepping stones, grounding us in our reality and helping us better understand our desires, fears, and values. Guided by Jung's insight, Max chooses to see his past indulgence in distractions not as wasted time, but as a foundation for awareness and change. Each moment spent on distractions taught him something about himself, his tendencies, his triggers, his unaddressed needs. By viewing these moments as opportunities for growth, he can transform regret into a powerful motivator to make more mindful choices. The goal isn't to erase the past, but to use it as fuel for future progress. Looking at past actions through the lens of self-compassion and curiosity turns regret into resilience, where mistakes become necessary parts of the journey, allowing the shadow to serve as a teacher rather than an obstacle. With the burden of regret lightened, Max feels ready to take more decisive action. His newfound self-awareness fuels a shift from passivity to intention as he begins using his shadow side as a driving force to build a life with purpose and direction. Part 5. Channeling the Shadow. With a clearer understanding of himself and his motivations, Max begins to see his shadow as a potent source of energy. He recognizes that the qualities he once tried to suppress, like his competitiveness, ambition, and even his anger, aren't hindrances. They're part of what makes him driven and resilient. Instead of viewing these traits as weaknesses, he learns to channel them toward his goals, fueling him rather than pulling him back into endless distractions. Carl Jung argued that the integration of the shadow, our hidden, often unacknowledged side, makes us more complete. unlocking aspects of ourselves that can bring about profound change. Jung taught that the energy within our darker traits doesn't have to be destructive. When channeled with intention, it's a source of power and motivation. For Max, embracing his shadow means redirecting the frustration he once poured into distractions toward his ambitions, allowing his inner drive to strengthen his resilience and focus. In this way, his shadow becomes a source of empowerment rather than a source of guilt or self-doubt. Max commits to tackling his goals with newfound intensity, letting his competitive nature drive him rather than hold him back. He turns his frustration into determination and his ambition into focused action, fully embodying his potential without fear of these darker traits. He now understands that his darker side isn't something to hide or escape from. Instead, it's a reservoir of strength he can tap into to face challenges with courage. For anyone on a similar journey, the takeaway is clear. Embracing the shadow side allows for fuller, more authentic growth. When used intentionally, it can transform ambition, fear, and even anger into tools for personal progress, adding resilience and depth to one's journey. Max's transformation from distraction to self-mastery reveals a powerful truth. Your dark side, when harnessed and understood, can be your greatest ally. Learning to embrace and integrate it opens the path to a balanced, purpose-driven life, with energy to face every challenge that comes your way. If this video helped you see your own dark side differently, hit subscribe to stay with us on this journey of growth and self-mastery. And if you're ready for the next step, check out our next video on building unstoppable focus.